AITA for leaving my boyfriend's office Christmas party after he repeatedly humiliated me in front of his coworkers? Last weekend, my boyfriend, 30M, invited me, 28F, to his office Christmas dinner. I was nervous but excited to go. I've never met his coworkers before, and I wanted to make a good impression. He's in corporate finance, and I'm an event planner, so I figured our worlds are different, but I didn't think it'd be a big deal. I spent hours picking the perfect outfit, fixing my hair, and making sure I looked presentable. When we got to the venue, everything seemed fine at first. His coworkers were polite but not overly friendly. I shook hands with a few people, smiled, and made some small talk. Then, during dinner, the conversation turned to jobs. Someone asked what I did, and before I could answer, my boyfriend laughed and said, "Oh, she plans parties for a living while the rest of us deal with real problems." Everyone laughed, and I just sat there trying not to look completely embarrassed. I ignored it, thinking maybe I was being sensitive. But a little later, someone asked me what kind of events I liked to plan. Again, before I could even open my mouth, he cut in, "She's really good at kids' birthday parties, clowns, balloons, that kind of thing." More laughter. I didn't even bother responding this time. I just smiled awkwardly and took a sip of water. Dessert started coming out, and I was already planning how to politely keep quiet for the rest of the night. I didn't want to be part of any conversations that might give him another chance to make a joke at my expense. People at the table were loosening up, chatting about their personal lives, favorite restaurants, and random things about the holiday season. I tried focusing on eating my dessert and avoiding eye contact with anyone who might direct a question my way. That didn't last long. One of his coworkers, a guy sitting a few seats down, turned to me and said, "So, how did you two meet?" Before I could answer, my boyfriend jumped in. He said, "Oh, I practically saved her. She was in a dead-end job trying to find herself, and then I came along and gave her a little direction." I blinked. That wasn't even close to true. I was already working as an event planner when we met, and I was doing fine. I started to correct him, but he waved me off like it wasn't a big deal and kept talking. "Yeah, I've been helping her get serious about her career. She's doing okay now, but she still has a lot to learn." People at the table chuckled politely. I could tell they didn't know whether to laugh or stay quiet. Another coworker, a woman sitting across from me, tried to shift the subject to something less awkward. "Event planning must be interesting. What kind of events do you work on?" Finally, I thought I could actually speak for myself. I smiled and started to answer, "Well, I work with all kinds of clients, but..." My boyfriend cut me off again. "Oh, she does weddings sometimes, but not like the fancy ones you see in magazines. It's more like backyard stuff. She keeps it simple." I froze. I wasn't even sure what to say. That wasn't true at all. I've worked on corporate events, large-scale fundraisers, and yes, some weddings, but I'm proud of my work, and it's not backyard parties. The woman gave me a sympathetic look and tried to steer the conversation back to me. "That sounds like a lot of coordination. What's the most challenging event you've worked on?" Again, before I could answer, he jumped in with a laugh. "Oh, probably trying to get my parents' anniversary party together. That's the only event she's planned where I actually helped her stay on track." Everyone laughed. I stared at him, completely stunned. That party was a nightmare to plan because his family kept changing their minds about everything. I was the one who handled it while he sat back and played video games the entire weekend. I didn't want to cause a scene, so I just pushed my dessert around on my plate and kept quiet. A coworker next to me started telling a story about his dog eating an entire tray of Christmas cookies, and the table shifted focus for a while. I thought the worst was over, but then my boyfriend decided to share his own funny story. He started with, "You all are going to love this. So the first time she met my parents..." I whipped my head toward him. "No." He looked at me and said, "Oh, come on, it's funny." "It's not," I said. But he kept going. He told the whole thing, how I had accidentally spilled wine on his mom's white carpet and tried to clean it up with a towel, only to make it worse. He mimicked me scrambling to apologize, saying she was so nervous she looked like she wanted to cry. Everyone at the table was laughing again, and I could feel people glancing at me to see if I was laughing too. I wasn't. When he finished, someone said, "Wow, you've got a lot of patience, man. Most guys wouldn't let that slide." He said, "Yeah, she's lucky I'm such a chill guy." I leaned over to him again and said, "I asked you not to tell that story. Why would you do that?" He didn't even look at me. "Relax, it's just a joke. Stop being uptight." I sat back in my chair, biting my tongue so I wouldn't snap at him in front of everyone. A coworker across the table asked him another question about his work, and he launched into some long-winded answer about quarterly projections. I took the chance to excuse myself, mumbling something about needing to use the restroom. I walked out of the dining room and headed straight for the coat rack by the entrance. I wasn't going back to that table. When he got home, the first thing he did was slam the front door. He walked into the living room, tossing his coat onto the couch like he owned the place. I was sitting in the chair across from him, already knowing this was going to turn into an argument. "What the hell was that?" he said, pacing. "Do you have any idea how you made me look tonight?" I stared at him for a second before responding. "How I made you look? Are you serious? You spent the whole night making me the butt of your jokes and you're mad at me?" He stopped pacing and looked at me. You embarrassed me. You got up and walked out like a child. Everyone was asking where you went, and I had to explain your little tantrum. I stood up. You had to explain me? What about all the times you interrupted me tonight or made fun of me in front of your coworkers? How do you think that made me feel? He waved his hand dismissively. Oh, come on. It wasn't that bad. I was joking. People laughed. It's not my fault you can't handle a little fun. Fun? You think it's fun to humiliate me? To cut me off every time I try to speak? To tell stories I specifically asked you not to tell? He threw his hands up. God, you're so dramatic. I didn't humiliate you. I made a couple of jokes. Everyone was having a good time except you. You're the only one who couldn't just go along with it. I said, you don't get it, do you? You weren't joking. You were tearing me down all night, and for what? To look cool in front of your coworkers? I wasn't tearing you down, he snapped. You're so sensitive. If you just laughed with everyone else, no one would have thought twice about it. But no, you had to make it a thing. I shook my head. You don't get to decide how I feel about what you said. And you sure as hell don't get to blame me for leaving when you couldn't respect me enough to stop. He took a deep breath like he was trying to calm himself down, but it didn't last long. Do you know how important that dinner was? That was my chance to make connections, to show people I'm more than just the numbers guy. And you walked out like some... He stopped himself, but I could tell he wanted to say something worse. Like some what? I said, taking a step toward him. Say it. Say whatever it is you're thinking, because at this point, I don't even care anymore. He pointed at me, like someone who doesn't give a damn about anyone but herself. That's what you acted like. I stared at him, stunned for a second. You think I'm selfish? You think I walked out of there because I didn't care about you? I walked out because I couldn't take another second of you treating me like a joke. He scoffed and sat down on the couch, shaking his head. You're unbelievable. I bring you to an event to meet the people I work with, and you can't even play along. Do you know how hard it is to make a good impression in my line of work? Do you even care about how that reflects on me? I felt like I was talking to a brick wall. How it reflects on you? What about how you treated me? What about how it reflects on me when my own boyfriend can't say one nice thing about me all night? You're blowing this out of proportion, he said, leaning back like he was done arguing. I didn't say anything that bad. You just can't handle someone poking fun at you. I stood there for a moment, not sure what to say. Finally, I said, you don't respect me. That's what this comes down to. You don't respect me or my work or my boundaries, and you sure as hell don't respect my feelings. He didn't even look at me when he said, whatever. If you're that upset, maybe you should have stayed home. I turned and walked toward the bedroom. I needed space to think, to figure out what I was going to do next. Behind me, I heard him say something, but I didn't ask him to repeat it. I didn't want to hear another word. The next morning, I woke up earlier than him. I made coffee and sat in the kitchen trying to collect my thoughts. I couldn't stop replaying the things he said the night before. He came into the kitchen a little while later, yawning and stretching like nothing had happened. He grabbed a mug, poured himself some coffee, and sat down across from me. For a minute, neither of us said anything. Finally, I broke the silence. We need to talk about last night. He sighed. Are we really still on this? I thought you'd cool off by now. No, I said, because you don't seem to understand why I'm upset. Every time I tried to talk or contribute to the conversation last night, you interrupted me. And the jokes? They weren't funny. They were mean. He leaned back in his chair. Here we go again. You can't take a joke. That's the real problem. I stared at him. You think humiliating me in front of your coworkers is a joke? No one else thought it was a big deal? They were all laughing. You're the only one who had an issue with it. Because I was the one you were making fun of, I said. I told you not to tell that story about your parents' party, and you did it anyway. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was for me? He rolled his eyes. You're making a big deal out of it. It was a harmless story. You're acting like I insulted you or something. You did insult me, I said. You insulted my job, my work, and me as a person. And when I told you to stop, you ignored me. He sipped his coffee, not saying anything for a moment. Then he said, you walked out. That's what people are going to remember. Not my mean jokes or whatever you're calling them. They're going to remember you walking out and making a scene. I didn't make a scene, I said. I quietly got up and left because I couldn't sit there and listen to you tear me down anymore. He shook his head. That's not how they'll see it. They'll think you're dramatic and rude. Do you have any idea how hard it's going to be for me to face those people on Monday? I put my mug down and folded my hands on the table. So let me get this straight. You're more concerned about what your coworkers think of you than how you treated me. He stared at me for a moment before responding. What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? Fine, I'm sorry you took it the wrong way. But I'm not apologizing for making people laugh. That's ridiculous. That's not an apology, I said. You're not sorry for what you did. You're just sorry I didn't laugh along with everyone else. He stood up and put his mug in the sink. I'm not doing this. I have work to do, and I'm not going to spend my Saturday arguing with you over something this petty. I stayed seated, watching as he walked out of the kitchen. I could hear him rummaging around in the living room, probably looking for his laptop or something to distract himself. I got up and went to the bedroom. I started pulling clothes out of the dresser and tossing them onto the bed. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there. When I came back out with a bag in my hand, he looked up from the couch. "What are you doing?" "I need space," I said. "I can't keep doing this. I need time to think about whether this relationship is even worth saving." He stood up. "Oh, come on, you're leaving? Really? That's your solution? You can't even handle one argument like an adult?" "This isn't just one argument," I said. "This is about respect, and right now I don't feel like you have any for me." He shook his head. "Fine, go. But don't expect me to come chasing after you. If you leave, that's on you." I didn't say anything else. I just walked out the door. I decided to stay with a friend for a few days to clear my head. When I told him I was leaving, he said, "Oh, here we go, running away from your problems instead of dealing with them." I said, "No, I don't want to deal with you. I need time to think about whether I even want to keep doing this." He didn't try to stop me. He just said, "If you leave, don't expect me to come chasing after you." I left anyway. Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, hit subscribe. See you in the next one.